Hello, and welcome to our short webinar version of our workshop, Empowering Educators Coping with Stress. My name is Sarah Wagner, and I'm here with my good friend and business partner, Hannah Mariotti. We are very excited to be partnering with UNH Professional Development and Training today to provide you with some tips and strategy to manage the unique stress that many educators experience, especially during this time of uncertainty and remote learning. Just a quick introduction before we begin. I am a school psychologist with a school district here in New Hampshire. Prior to becoming a school psychologist, I was a classroom teacher at the middle and high school level for many years, and I've also worked as a learning specialist and academic director. In addition, Hannah and I are co-owners of Beacon Coaching and Consulting, and I'm a mother to a wonderful, smart, and sassy little 6-year-old girl. Hannah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for that introduction. This is Hannah, and it's great to meet all of you. Similar to Sarah's, my background is in mental health and education. I've been really lucky to have worked in a variety of settings: public school, independent school, private practice, hospitals, you name it, and have experienced a lot of the stress that we're going to talk a little bit about today. I'm also a mom of an 11 and 12-year-old, and so far, so good with what we're doing in terms of homeschooling. And finally, we are really very grateful to all of you to be taking the time to be with us. Your time is precious, and we know this. And probably more importantly, we're really very grateful that you're taking time for yourselves to take care of yourselves. So thank you.
So we're going to be talking about some tips and strategies to really take control of your stress. And there's kind of 4 major categories, I guess, of ways in which to control your stress. And one is changing your mindset and thinking about what you can control. The next is learning to let go and finding acceptance. Reconnecting with your purpose is the 3rd step, and the final step is training your brain to focus on the positive. So I'm going to talk a bit about how to take control of your stress. And really it begins with changing your stress mindset. And what I'm talking about is the way you perceive stress, whether you perceive it as motivating or as debilitating. Does it paralyze you? Or can it motivate you to do something about it? Kelly McGonigal is a health psychologist from Stanford. We have a video here that you can watch at your own time. We're not going to watch it together today, but I highly recommend it. She's talking about this idea that we tend to believe that stress is bad for us, that it's bad for our health, and that belief about stress can kind of contribute to a negative response to stress. But it's actually that belief that stress is harmful that has the negative impact on our bodies and minds, not the stress itself. So in other words, how we think about our stress changes how we respond to it. So how can we go about changing our mindset about stress? The first step is to name it. So for example, currently I'm stressed out about trying to connect with my most vulnerable students who are not responding to my efforts to reach out to them. Okay, there, I've named it. Then I own it. What does the stress say about your values? I am stressed about this because I care about my job and I care deeply for my students' well-being. So take a moment to think about, what does your stress say about you and what you value? And then you use it. How can you use your stress to motivate you into action? So I'm thinking about, how can I find creative ways to try and engage my students? Maybe I can make video messages to send them. Maybe I can invite them to play a game of Pictionary online with me. So that's just an example of sort of some simple strategies to change your mindset. And when I say simple, please understand, I know it's not easy, but they are kind of 3 simple strategies. Another strategy or another tool that I'm going to share with you today is called the Spheres of Control tool. And this is based on Stephen Covey's work. He's the author of Chicken Soup for the Soul and a number of other books. So he presents this idea of spheres of control, where you have kind of that inner circle are things that you can control. That's the green circle in the middle. The outer circle, the yellow circle, is your sphere of influence. And the red circle is a sphere of concern. So those are things, sources of stress that you have really absolutely no control over. I invite you to think about what your specific sources of stress are. Maybe even write them down. Think about maybe 2 or 3 different sources of stress that you have. And then take a minute to think about which sphere those sources of stress might go. Again, I'll give you an example for myself. Certainly, I feel pretty stressed about the virus. I also feel stressed, as I mentioned before, about kind of the disengaged students that I work with. And lastly, I'm feeling stressed in trying to balance working from home and being a parent. So where might those go in the spheres of control? Well, the virus clearly goes into the sphere of concern, the red zone. I have absolutely no control over what's going on with that. My disengaged students, do I have control over them? No, but perhaps they would go into my sphere of influence. What are ways in which I may be able to get them more engaged? Balancing work from home and being a parent, there are things about that I can control. For example, I can set a schedule for the day that might help us kind of keep on track. There's also aspects of being, of working at home and balancing that with being a parent that I might have to let go of, that might help me gain some control over this stress. For example, I think I probably have to accept that my daughter's going to get more screen time than she typically does, and that's okay. She's going to be okay. So to kind of summarize, the key here is to think about what you can control and focus on that. Let go of what you can't control, and then think about how you might expand your sphere of influence to have just a little bit more to control around your stress. So Hannah, I'm going to go ahead and let you talk about some strategies for letting go and finding acceptance.
And thanks, Sarah. Thinking about what we can control is a great way to enter into this idea of understanding mindfulness. We spend a lot of time maybe judging ourselves for feelings that we really have no control over. So having the feeling arising is out of our control. We feel it and it happens. We get frustrated and that arises. Mindfulness is a way to help us ground ourselves, and it's a way to control how we do respond to the feeling. So really, I think this is a way to ground ourselves in any time of, any uncertain time, in any situation that could arise for us. And I think one of the ways to get our head around it, because it can feel somewhat intimidating as it's sort of abstract, it seems abstract, and everybody has a different idea about it, just to provide you with some definitions. So mindfulness is the ability to know what's happening in your head at any given moment without getting carried away by it. And that's Dan Harris. There's a video that's narrated by Dan Harris for you to take a look at later. You can see it on the screen. Another way to conceptualize mindfulness is from Viktor Frankl, between stimulus and response. So between the feeling and how we act around that feeling, there's a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. So it's really figuring out how to practice that pause, create that space, and find some relief before we react, which can provoke a landslide of more difficult emotions and responses when something difficult comes up for us. So mindfulness is paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So there may be circumstances where my frustration level becomes really high, and then I condemn myself for having that feeling. I should be, usually it's in comparison to someone else. Someone else is managing homeschooling really well, and I'm not. I get frustrated, I get angry. Why do I have these feelings? It's mindfulness is really giving ourselves that compassion to not judge our feelings. So let's talk a little bit about the how-to of mindfulness, the practicalities of this. One way is to think about this being your superpower. So I remind myself I want to move from the POW to the now. So what that means is rather than reacting, lashing out, what is another way that I can respond to a feeling that I have and find myself in the now in a peaceful way, so that I can respond in a way that doesn't cause more distress. Um, Misconceptions about mindfulness abound, and it's not really about making your mind empty. You don't need any fancy gear. It's more than meditating, and it can be incorporated into your daily activities, which is really key when you're trying to juggle all of the things that you are managing your online classes, perhaps managing all of the domestic duties that come along with being at home. But the good news is we're in that ultimate mindfulness experience right now. In some ways, we don't have a choice. We can't project too far into the future, but we can be here now, bring ourselves back to that present moment. Awareness and acceptance can help us manage our worries and uncertainty. And mindfulness is a way to do this. It induces the relaxation response. It grounds us. There's also a video included here about listening, because practicing mindfulness can be as easy as focusing on your senses and focusing on how you listen to the things that are going on in your environment. So, daily mindfulness, what are some ways that we can practice this in a very concrete and easy way? Eating mindfully. We might be, scarfing down our lunch in between a session, in between a teaching session. Is there any way that we can take some space and nourish ourselves, taste our food, smell our food? You come out of that feeling maybe more satisfied and nourished. We can walk mindfully. So, talking about these things, I think what I want to emphasize is within our day, and as busy as it can be, we can practice mindfulness. So we might be moving from one room to another room. We might be moving from inside to outside, and we can give ourselves give our attention to those things in our environment. Think about your surroundings. Notice your feet when they touch the ground and when they leave the ground. Feeling your muscles moving in the space. Observe what's going on around you. Number 3 is observing your breathing. One of the things that I tend to do when stress becomes very strong is I hold my breath, where I find myself making my breath gets a lot shorter. So just focusing on taking a good, deep, nourishing breath and letting that out can reconnect you to the present. Connecting with your senses. Something that we kind of take for granted. We don't pay a lot of attention often when we're stressed to the different senses. Smelling your coffee in the morning, maybe the ocean air or the breeze, wood fire from a pizza, things like that. Maybe your clothing against your body, things like that that could ground you in that moment. Pausing between action. So we talked about practicing the pause, and this may be a way of making us, bringing us into the present and making it concrete. So pausing, feeling the weight of your body in your chair, pausing and feeling the door handle of your home before you open it. Any of those things, putting mini pauses in between your actions instead of just sort of plowing ahead, which is what I tend to do for sure, and rolling through your day. It's those little pauses. Listening wholeheartedly, practicing our listening. I think we have a very unique opportunity to do this. Next time, we're in conversation, making it our goal to fully listen. This can be difficult when we're not just in a situation where we're listening, but we're also watching the people in the meetings. But practicing this rather than being busy planning what we're going to say next. Getting lost in the flow of doing things you love. With a lot of uncertainty, it's easy to let go of our hobbies, the things that we enjoy doing, but taking some time to incorporate those activities into your weekly routine can really help you be more grounded and increase your happiness ultimately. Meditate daily. This can feel really intimidating to people. I can't sit still. I'm not able to do this. I'm not doing it right. The good news here is that even if you're just practicing this, you're doing it right, and it can help your brain shift. Even 10 minutes a day can have a positive impact. Finding an app that works for you, someone in one of those apps, a voice that can talk you through a meditation. All of these things can help you move through your day in a less stressful way. Mixing up your routine can be very helpful. Might be a little bit more difficult to do when you have limited space, but just shifting that perspective can help you see the world in a different way, focus on your senses, and utilize a part of yourself that you didn't realize you weren't before. And then finally, observing your thoughts and emotions. You are not your thoughts. You can be the observer of your thoughts, which is somewhat of a shift when we are stressed and we're sort of plowing ahead. But just by becoming aware that you have these thoughts and then non-judgmentally observing them. One way to do this might be to pretend that you are someone else and looking at your thoughts, or how you would react to a friend who shared his or her thoughts or their thoughts with you. Typically, we are much less judgmental with others' thoughts and feelings. So maybe to be able to be a friend to yourself in that way can be very helpful. And included here is just one way. It's called a mindful snack, a way to give yourself the opportunity to pause, check in with yourself, and ground yourself. So another way to ground ourselves would be to reconnect with our why, or reconnect with your why. Why is this important? When we are moving forward at a fast pace with lots of demands, it is really easy to step back from why we became educators in the first place, to have that distance really handicap us in terms of our passion and our purpose and our meaning for doing our understanding behind why we do these things. So connecting or reconnecting with your why can help you recall those great days when days are difficult. It can support you on those difficult days, and it really encourages you to connect with others in a deeper way. If I'm doing this for a particular reason, I have a passion, the people around me are doing it because they have a certain passion. And one way to do this is to take some time to reflect. So once again, giving you that chance to practice the pause, some questions to consider. Why did you get into teaching? Listing 10 hopes that you have as a teacher, and then breaking it down even more, starring the 3 that are most important and circling the 1 that is of top importance. And maybe making that your intention for the day. What do you want students to say about you 15 years after they leave your classroom, after they leave this experience? You might want to write this as if someone were speaking about you in the third person. And finally, who do you hope will speak about you at your retirement party? I know we talked about mindfulness and being in the present, so this is just a temporary exercise to put you in that position to reflect. What do you hope this person will say? And take a few moments to script as much of the speech as you can. And this can be done with a friend, with a colleague, who maybe can help give you some ideas about some observations and some ideas and some kindness in terms of why you're doing this and how you're doing this.
Thanks, Hannah. Such great advice, and a lot of what you were talking about in terms of, these suggestions for how to kind of reconnect with your purpose as an educator are really about kind of the power of positivity. Reconnecting with positive feelings about your profession can kind of change the way you feel about things in the present. So this is really kind of the last strategy that we're going to talk about, and that's how you can sort of change your lens. Sean Achor, a psychologist out of Harvard, says that it's not necessarily reality that shapes us. It's the lens through which your brain views the world that shapes your reality. If you can change the lens, we can change your happiness. Again, we've included a video for you to watch in your own time. This is probably one of my all-time favorite TED Talks, Sean Achor. He's very, very funny. He talks really fast, so sometimes you have to watch it a few times to catch all the really good nuggets. But he's as I said, he's a psychologist, and he has really focused his research in the field of positive psychology, which is a field that really looks at how do we enhance our well-being through kind of enhancing positive emotions, as opposed to looking at mitigating negative feelings. It's really about those promoting positive feelings. So he's dedicated his career to researching happiness. And he talks about, in this video, this idea that we tend to believe that if we are successful, we will be happy, when the reality is it's the other way around. When we are happy, we are more likely to be successful. His research has shown that 75% of success at work is determined by your optimism level, social support, and the ability to see stress as a challenge instead of a threat. That's Kelly McGonigal's work, right? Our stress mindset. So only 25% of our success at work is determined by our intellect and our education level. It's really about how we see the world, and it's also about our social connections. He talks about this idea that positivity in the present is what leads to happiness. And again, happiness is what leads to success. So how do we go about becoming more positive and thinking positively? We tend to think that kind of naturally some people are more optimistic and some people are more pessimistic, and you're born that way. It's a temperament or a personality trait. And while that is true to a certain degree, it is optimism and positivity is something that you can work at and become better at. You can become more optimistic with practice, and you can think more positively with practice. So there's a handful of strategies that are research-based that we're sharing with you today that can really help promote those positive thoughts, and therefore the positive feelings that lead us to feel happier, more content in our lives. So the first step is practice gratitude. There's a lot of science behind this. There's brain research that shows when we are practicing gratitude, it actually changes the, what's going on in our brain to help us feel happier on that cellular level in the brain. One suggestion would be to every single day think of 3 things that you're grateful for. This exercise works best if every day you can try and think of something different than you had thought about the day before. But also be kind to yourself. There are going to be days, those bad days, when, to be honest, there's not a whole lot I'm feeling grateful for. Maybe I'm simply grateful that I made it through my day, and that's okay. But to think about those 3 things in your lives every day that you feel grateful for can go a long way in producing those happy chemicals in the brain and changing your mindset. Journaling about good things that have happened. This is really kind of what Hannah was talking about in terms of, thinking about those stories, the good days of teaching and those kinds of things. What's really interesting, I think, about the brain is that on a cellular level, our brains don't really distinguish very well between a real experience and an imagined experience. So a real experience, say, of walking along the beach on a beautiful day can, produce those sort of happy neurotransmitters, serotonin and such that make us feel good. Well, if I sit and think about walking on the beach on a beautiful day and spend some time really imagining, what does the sand feel like between my toes? What does the surf sound like? Is it a gentle surf? Is it a powerful surf? How does the sun feel on my body? My brain reacts as if I am actually experiencing that. And again, those happy chemicals are produced. So if you can journal, take some time to journal about happy memories, maybe a place that you love, maybe it's a place you return to often, maybe it's a place you've only been once, but it makes you feel content and happy inside to think about it. And when you journal, try and recollect as many details as you can, because as you write those details down, you will really relive those experiences. And research shows that the act of physically writing with a pen or pencil is more powerful. It kind of connects to the brain better than, say, typing. So that's an important piece of this. We all know that exercise is good for us. We hear that all the time. And I just want to say that I don't want to, beat that one too much, except to just share the idea that exercise can be so helpful in terms of those happy chemicals, right? The endorphins. If you can change your mindset about why you want to exercise and have it not be about maybe losing weight or trying to fit into a certain pair of jeans or have your body look a certain way, if you can let go of that piece and think of exercise as something that helps you feel good in your mind and heart and soul, you will get a lot out of that exercise. I can tell you that it is a sanity saver for me. Hannah already talked about meditating, so I won't go into that one. Just know that meditating is not just a way to kind of help yourself feel sort of calm, but it also can help promote those positive thoughts and feelings. Being kind, again, there is research behind this, that random acts of kindness help us feel good about ourselves, not just feel more maybe compassionate towards others. And lastly, a key piece of this is to accept and understand that you will have negative thoughts. We all do. We're human beings. Our brain thinks that's its job. They're going to be negative thoughts that arise. And the trick is to figure out how to kind of reframe those thoughts. So let me give you a couple examples. Perhaps a thought that comes into your brain often is something like, I am so overwhelmed, I can't handle this. One way to maybe reframe that or combat it with a positive thought is to say something like, I am stronger than I think. When I talk to students about this idea, I have one student in particular who we talk about this idea of having supervillain thoughts and superhero thoughts, right? So when that supervillain shows up in your brain, you want to send the superhero in to try and fight that supervillain. So what are your superhero thoughts that might help you feel better? So like I said, I'm stronger than I think is a great one. Here's another example, a negative thought that could arise. I think it probably does for many educators, especially in a time like this where we're juggling so many different things. I'm not doing my job well. I'm failing at this. If you can reframe that by saying to yourself, I'm doing my best, I am enough. Sometimes you have to repeat those thoughts over and over and over again for the negative thought to kind of finally go away. But it takes practice, right? It's not something that's going to work overnight, and it's not going to be something that will that you're going to be able to do automatically at first. But the more you practice it, the more automatic it will be to reframe those negative thoughts. So that concludes our webinar. We hope that this was helpful to you and that you found that you were able to take away at least maybe one or two ideas of how to better manage your stress. We do have our contact information on the title page, so please feel free to reach out to us with any questions or if you'd like any additional resources on the topics we covered. We really appreciate and thank you for your participation today, and thank you for all your hard work in schools. Hannah, do you have any concluding words or final thoughts?
Sure. I'll just concur with you, Sarah, and thank everybody for being with us. We're so grateful. We know that this is a tough time, and we're also just wanting you to be caring for yourselves. So we're sending that out to you. Thank you so much.